Hello everybody, this is the last of the videos telling the Easter story. I hope you've enjoyed them, and I particularly hope they were helpful to you in really filling in the Bible time lessons, whether you were on level 1, 2, 3, or even maybe on level 4. I'm going to share my screen now because we're going to go straight into the last story, and hopefully this will be you'll be able to fill in the Bible time as a result of hearing this particular video. The Easter story number 4. We've had 3 characters so far that have helped us understand the Easter story. We've had Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus. We've had Pilate, the Roman governor, who condemned Jesus to death. We've had Joseph of Arimathea, who buried Jesus in his own tomb. We've passed through Good Friday and all that happened there. We've come to Easter Sunday, and we remember that when they went to the tomb, the ladies on the Easter Sunday morning, the tomb was empty. And the angel said, "He is not here, he has risen. Go and tell his disciples." Well, 2 of his disciples, they're not the ones who are named as the 12, but 2 other followers of Jesus were going home. They'd been in Jerusalem for the weekend, for the Passover. Now they're going home to where they live. They're not very happy. It's been a very strange weekend. Jesus had been put on the cross. Jesus had died. And now there were these rumors that Jesus was alive. They couldn't understand it at all as they made their way down the road towards where they lived. They lived in Emmaus. It was about 7 miles away, so they had quite a journey from Jerusalem to Emmaus. It would have been hot, it would have been tiring, and they were looking forward to getting home in Emmaus. As they're walking down the road and talking about all that had happened over the weekend, they didn't notice that a stranger was suddenly coming close to them. As I tell the story, I've got some titles which you may like to try and remember that may help you in remembering this very important story. The first title is this: The Man They Met. They didn't know who he was. He just said, "Can I join you?" And they said, "Of course you can." We probably can guess it was Jesus, but they didn't know that. We don't know why they didn't. Maybe it's the way Jesus looked. Maybe Jesus didn't want them to understand who he was for a time. And he said to them, "You look very sad. Why are you so sad? What's happened?" Now, the second title is The Mistakes They Made. And they certainly made mistakes when they told the stranger who was now going to walk with them what had actually happened. They said, "You probably heard of Jesus, Jesus of Nazareth. He was a great man. He was a wonderful teacher. He taught us things that we'd never, ever heard before. He healed many people. He did many marvelous miracles." But just 2 or 3 days away, the Pharisees and the religious leaders captured him, and they accused him of doing all sorts of things, and Pilate sentenced him to death. And he died on a cross just outside of Jerusalem. But this morning, some of the ladies who had gone to the tomb to put spices on his body found that the tomb was open and it was empty, and Jesus had gone. And nobody knows where Jesus is. He's completely disappeared, and we don't know what's happening. It's all very strange, because we hoped that Jesus would be the great man who would be the Messiah, the Christ, who would get rid of the Romans and set up a new kingdom. And none of that is now going to happen. It's all very strange. Well, as they went down the road, the stranger started to talk to them. And he said, "Well, I quite understand why you feel sad and confused, but let me tell you a little bit about what the scriptures say." And he started to tell them. He said, "Actually, if you go back into the Old Testament scriptures, starting with Moses and some of the other prophets, they all said the Messiah, the Christ, would come, but they did say also he would have to die. And eventually he would come alive again and enter into the glory of heaven. In fact, he said, did not the Christ have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" The two on the road to Emmaus, listening to the stranger explaining all this, began to see it looks as though the Messiah had to die. We can't totally understand it, but this is what our friend is telling us from the Holy Scriptures. This was the message they heard, which they began to think about very carefully indeed. Well, as they got close to Emmaus, it looked as though the stranger was going to go a little bit further. But they said, you can't go any further. It's getting towards evening. It'll soon be dark. You must stay. Come and have a meal with us. You can stay the night if you want. We've plenty of room. So they did. And he came in, and they found bread, and they found some wine, I guess, and they were about to have a meal. And they said to the stranger, would you give thanks for the meal? And he said, of course I will. And he said a prayer, and he broke the bread, and he was about to pass it to each of them, when all of a sudden, something remarkable happened. He disappeared. He wasn't there at all. He had completely gone. They looked around, but there was no sign of the stranger. Where was he? And then they had a thought. That stranger who knew so much, it was Jesus. He has actually come alive. The stranger disappeared. They knew it was Jesus. It was a miracle, a wonderful miracle. And then they thought, what should we do? We better tell others. No, we're tired. We've walked 7 miles. It's dark now. We can hardly go back to Jerusalem to tell the disciples what we've seen. Yet they thought, we must. It's so important. They're so sad that Jesus had died. We must go and tell them that we've met him, that he's actually alive. And so they set out back to Jerusalem, another 7-mile long walk, even though they were tired. It was certainly a mission that they had to undertake, a mission that they had to go. So when they got to Jerusalem, they thought, I wonder where the disciples will be. Maybe they're in that room where we had the Last Supper, the last meal that we had with Jesus. Maybe it's there. Let's go and try and find them there. When they got there, there was a door and it was shut and locked. They banged on the door as much as they could, and eventually, very quietly, they were allowed to go in. And then the door was locked again because they were frightened. The Jews had taken Jesus and put him to death. Maybe they would take some of his followers. But then suddenly the two who'd come back from Emmaus said, there's great news. There's wonderful news. Jesus is actually alive. We've just seen him. He walked with us down the road to our home. He came into our home. He took some bread and he broke it. And then he suddenly disappeared. It was Jesus. He was certainly alive. And we've seen him. They told the disciples Jesus was alive. They had seen him. Well, while they were doing that, suddenly there was another miracle. Something wonderful happened. Even though the door was shut and bolted, and even though they were making sure that nobody could possibly get in, suddenly Jesus was there. He'd come through a shut door. No wonder they were frightened. No wonder they were amazed. Was this a spirit? Was it a ghost? Was it really Jesus? And Jesus said, it's me. You can handle me and see. It really is me. And they were absolutely amazed. It's Jesus, they said. He's alive. He's come back to us. They were absolutely thrilled. This wonderful news. He had died, but now he was alive. Think about those titles, will you, to help you remember the story. The man they met, the mistakes they made about what had happened, the message that he brought to them that the Christ had to suffer and then he would come back again, the miracle they saw when he disappeared, and then the mission they had to go and tell everybody that Jesus was alive. As we come to the end of the story, maybe we now altogether can agree that Jesus is really alive. He's now in heaven, but he was alive and rose from the dead that first Easter time. In level 3, you have a key verse. It's a very important verse in the Bible, and we'll finish today's video with that verse. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. That's Romans 10 and verse 9. Say it again with me. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Well, I hope that you enjoyed the video, and I hope it will help you understand more about what happened on Good Friday and Easter Sunday. And most of all, I hope that you'll really begin to think of how important it is to trust Jesus, because he is alive and he wants to be our friend and our Savior for every single one of us. God bless you all.